What's going on, guys? Chip here. Welcome back to another Pokemon TCG video where today I'm joined by top 4 finisher at the Atlantic City Regional Championships, Isaiah Bradner. Isaiah, of course, is the 2019 NAIC International Champion in the Seniors Division, so that makes this his first major event as a master, and he was able to get top 4, which is absolutely insane. Congratulations, Isaiah. I know you must be feeling great, but yeah, how are you feeling? How does that feel?
Thanks, Chip. It feels great. I was obviously super nervous going into my first event, but I knew I put the time into it. I had a great testing team for it, and I felt like my deck was pretty solid after the first few rounds. As always, you get into the event, there are always the nerves. Maybe my deck's not good enough, and especially, aging up to Masters, everyone says it's a ton harder, and I do think that that's true. It's definitely a harder division. So I was like, I don't know what's going to happen in this tournament. Who knows where I'll place? But obviously, got a little lucky. I think I played pretty well and was happy to finish top 4 for sure.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And you did it with Jirachi Mewtwo, a deck that also got another top 4 finish. It was kind of crazy. Like, in the top 4, there was 3 Mewtwo decks and then Pidgeotto control.
Yeah.
And also looking at top 8, no Ability Zard, which I think was kind of a surprise to people. So why don't you just talk to us a little bit about why you felt like Mewtwo ended up being the play for the tournament and how you kind of landed on this list. How did this 60 cards come about for you?
The other top 4 was Mewtwo Jirachi as well, right?
Yes, yeah, Tristan's.
I think that I think that Tristan and his group actually got the idea from our group or something like that. We were testing Mewtwo Jirachi, and then they came over for a bit and saw it, and then I think that they were inspired, and I think their entire gang, or at least some of them, played it.
Yeah.
Because of that, so that's why the lists were super similar. I think the only difference was they didn't play acrobikes.
Okay.
But So I decided on Mewtwo on Friday. I went to the event. I was pretty convinced that I was either going to be playing Pikarom or a Mewtwo deck that I've been testing for a while with my testing group. It was Ability Reshiram pretty much, but it had 2 Mewtwo in it, a Macargo GX, a Solgaleo, and a Charizard GX, just to give you access to the more powerful attacks. But what Mewtwo didn't have, it gave you the Ninetales, so you could gust up anything, which I felt was pretty good in Mirror because you could keep their energy off the board, remove their Ninetales. So that's what I wanted to play kind of going into the final day. But unfortunately, it turned out to be pretty inconsistent. So I was kind of left with a struggle as to what to play. And then the night before, me and Justin Bakari stayed up really late playing games with this Jirachi Mewtwo list that Kian Amini, actually, he sent it to us. We changed a few cards in the list, and I decided that I was going to either play that or Pika. I woke up in the morning and I felt that even though Pika was a comfort pick, Mewtwo felt much better against the meta, especially against Pikarom itself. That was the main thing we had tested the night before. So I felt like it was a good, consistent deck. And one thing that I loved about it was that it had the ability to kind of beat everything, especially because Cross Divide is an extremely broken attack. Being able to place 200 damage counters, anywhere you want, gives you the chance to beat everything as long as you draw decently. So yeah, that's one reason why I really liked it. And I also kind of like decks that have a ton of options, toolbox decks. So those were some of the base reasons I played it.
Yeah, sure. And this definitely fits that category of a ton of options. So many different attackers because of Mew and Mewtwo's perfection ability. And there's definitely been a lot of text that people have pulled in and out of their Mewtwo list. So I just want to ask you questions about a couple of the ones you decided to include. One of them being Reshiram and Charizard Gx. Of course, that's what was originally in the deck, what Henry Brand played to win the World Championships. But once the Hidden Fates Charizard came out, it seemed like that was kind of just the natural removal, right? Like people just kind of pulled the Reshiram and Charizard out of the deck. So what made you feel like it was worth putting back in and including for this weekend?
So actually, a list that I put in my article that I wrote for before the tournament, it didn't include the Reshiram and Charizard. And I thought that, I don't really need this card because if there's low HP stuff, I'll just kill it with the Flamethrower from the Charizard GX. And then if there's high HP stuff, I'll just blow it up with my Macargo and I'll be fine. But whenever I was playing games with the deck, it was especially relevant against Pikarom to be able to do that high amount of damage while keeping your energy on board. If you removed your energy from the board, then it was easy for them to go reset stamp and then hit for 150 on your active. And then they could put the 3 energy on active and have Tag Bolt set up for 5 prizes next turn.
Sure.
So that was really hard for you to come back from. Past that, I felt like the Reshiram and Charizard was pretty much your only win condition against Guardian.
Right.
If you didn't have it, then you literally have no attackers that can do anything. So with it, if you're able to pressure with it early, you can get some easy prizes. And late game, if you draw well enough, then you can copy its GX with Mewtwo. So it gave you a win condition in that matchup, and it was extremely good against Pikarom for keeping energy on board. Also, 230 is just a really good attack number.
For sure.
So the last thing that I think about it is that it let me use a big attack without doing my GX or discarding my energy. Or if I prize Macargo, that was one thing that happened a lot over the weekend. If I prize Macargo, I just needed kind of a good base attack to use. And so Charizard's kind of there for insurance, and Guardian and Pikarom specifically.
Sure. Another thing I wanted to ask you about is the Giratina that you chose to play. It seems like around this spot there have been a lot of one prize psychic Pokemon people have played, and they all three obviously have very different uses, being the Giratina, the Mewtwo with Mind Report, and then the Wobbuffet that locks Prism Stars. So what led to you choosing to play the Giratina, and then also choosing not to play those other two cards?
So first and foremost, we didn't play Mewtwo because we played the Jirachi version of the deck, and first in the Jirachi version of the deck, your bench base is extremely tight just because you have 1 to 2 Jirachis on your board every game, and that really doesn't give you an option to bench the Mind Report Mewtwo. Second of all, we played Palpad because you could grab it with Jirachi, so it was more reach to find that to get your Molders back. So we felt like we didn't want both the Mind Report Mewtwo and the Palpad in our deck, so we just thought the Palpad was the better option. So that's what that one is.
Yeah.
As for the Mewtwo versus obviously the Giratina that I played, the Mewtwo was in the list that we were playing originally for obviously the Victini Prism Star turning that off. It can be good against Ditto in random situations, and it's good against Pikarom for Coco Prism. But we didn't feel like the Victini had a ton of use or relevance in the matchup. We felt like them getting off the Victini actually happened a lot less of the time than it actually mattered for you to have the Wobbuffet down. So that was one struggle that we found. And then against Pikarom, it was often hard to find at turn 1 while also getting your Welder. Usually you have to treasure for Mewtwo, or even if they go first and pop the Coco Prism, then it really doesn't matter a ton. So those were our initial findings during testings and why we thought about cutting it. And the reasons that I really like the Giratina, first of all, if you play against Malamar, then you can obviously do the 10-10 ping with the ability and then kill 2 Inkays. They have 60 HP, brings them down to 100, so you can cross divide them both. Mm-hmm. That's the first thing. Second of all is that if your opponent benches a Dedenne, GX, and a Mew to stop your Naganadel, then you can ping the Mew and the Dedenne with the ability, and then cross divide for 200 to take 3 prizes.
Yeah.
So that was one thing that I thought about before the event. Past that, it was extremely good against Pikarom in the games we played against it, because you can either, one, you can use it while the Pikarom's on the bench, put it down to 230, and then have the Flare Strike kill, which, as I talked about, keeping the energy is extremely important in that matchup. Or you can hit for 230 if they bring up the Pika, and then all you need to do is hit Custom Catcher on their bench GX, and then you can kill it for game. This makes you invulnerable to Stamp for the most part because you're always getting 6 cards, and it gives you 3 more prize cards on the turn when you play catchers and use the Tina ability, which makes the combo pretty easy to pull off. So it made that matchup a lot better, and it was also good against random stuff like Keldeo, and I actually used it against Azul in top 4 in game 2. I attacked with it. So,
okay.
I used it 0 times day 1, but it did come in day 2. So
gotcha.
Wobbuffet's a fine card, but that's why I played Tina. Yeah.
Sure. And another thing was you guys had 9 fire energies in here, so I'm sure the norm heading up to this point at least was 8 fires, 3 psychics. I'm sure there is some specific reasoning behind the extra fire energy. Do you want to talk about why you guys felt like it was good to have that extra card?
Yeah. So originally Keon had told us that he wanted 10 fire energy because with Palpad you can welder so many times a game, so he just wanted more and more fire energy, and that more was never bad. So with that mindset, we just kind of played as many as we could. We cut the last fire slot, I believe, for the second skateboard. Mm-hmm. But overall, having 9 energy was just good because you want to draw into them more each games. You really don't want to play down your stadiums if you don't have to in a majority of games. They're extremely good to set off combos off of Stamp. You can hit Stadium Welder, which is very good, especially with Jirachi, which gives you more reach for them. And you want to conserve your stadiums if you're against a plant deck. Maybe you don't need to play it down that turn. So just having more odds to draw into energy so you don't have to use your stadium was extremely good. So that was the main reason we did it. And then also to preventing us bad pricing, one thing was we found if you press 2 energy, you actually don't have a lot in your deck. You only have the 6 fires. So you could easily run out of energy, especially if you didn't have time to use Turbo Strike that game. So just more for consistency. and the deck can run out of energy if you don't draw your recycle system. So
Gotcha.
not a specific reasoning, just we like them higher count.
Yeah, for sure. So is there anything else that you guys, that we haven't talked about yet, that you guys were testing that didn't make its way into the list?
That I can think of, not really. We theoremoned a lot about more text for Guardian. Like we thought about putting in a Turtonator. We thought about putting in a Lysander Labs because we expected maybe more Guardian to be there. But we decided that we would just take our chance with Reshiram, and it ended up working out fine for me. But those were kind of the things we thought about. And then second reset stamp was something that we wanted in the deck, but we couldn't find the cut for it at the last second because obviously there are turns when you need that reset stamp, especially if you're using something like Tag Purge. They need a ton of pieces to get around it, or even if you're killing their big attacker, they need a lot to respond. So those were probably the biggest two cards we wanted in the deck.
All right. Well, if there's nothing else you want to add about the deck itself, I'd love to hear about how your tournament went. So, round one, you wake up in the morning, you've decided what your deck, like you told us, you didn't decide what deck you wanted to play until that morning. So was there any nervous jitters? Are you feeling nervous about this being your first Masters regionals? How did that, round one settle in for you?
So yeah, I was extremely nervous heading into the event. I hadn't played a ton of games with my deck. I felt kind of inexperienced in general with it, but I knew that going in, even though I hadn't played the most games with it, I felt like my deck was good. I felt like just that could carry me through, the first maybe 2 rounds until I got the sequencing down and everything. Mm-hmm. But I was nervous because obviously, yeah, as you said, first Masters event, didn't know how it was going to go. Wasn't completely sure of all the matchups, but I knew that my deck was good. So in that aspect, I was confident, but you're always nervous heading into round one of an event. Who isn't? It's a huge event. You've put so much time into it. You really want to do well to validate all that you've done. So
yeah,
I was definitely nervous in that regard.
I was going to ask as well, do you feel like heading into the event, did you feel any amount of pressure to perform? Since obviously you were one of the best senior players in the past couple of years, did you feel like did you feel that pressure, like you needed to make something happen to prove yourself, sort of?
Honestly, I don't think that I felt a ton of pressure. Okay. That's one thing that has never really, been a huge thing for me. I never felt pressure as being the one sponsored player in seniors when I got sponsored by ARG last year. I don't think that that's one thing that I felt going into the event. I didn't feel like, if I do bad, then everyone will be like, oh, Isaiah's so bad. He did good in seniors, but he can't really show up to the Masters. I kind of felt like I would earn the respect eventually if it didn't happen immediately. Sure. So I wasn't completely nervous about that. And I knew that the people that I'm close with know that I'm a good player and they respect me for that. So I'm obviously glad that I did well to show everyone that I can compete in Masters, but it wasn't something I was super worried about going into the event. That wasn't, the main thing. So sure. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, well, good for you, man. All right, well, moving on. Tell us how that first day of the tournament went, those first 9 rounds.
So going in, obviously, first time playing, I played 1 9-round tournament. Second time playing a 9-round tournament with a day 2, so I was excited. I had talked to my friends before how we really liked the 9 rounds a little bit better than seniors because, you can afford to lose 2 rounds, especially with how much variance Pokemon has. Sure. We felt like that gave a bunch more chances for skill to show through over 15 rounds, so I was excited for that. Round 1, I hit a Greens Reshiram, which was one of the matchups I was really not excited to face. We decided to cut Marshadow, resetting hole from our list. So that was definitely one of the rougher matchups. And I started out, I drew really poorly both games. I didn't get to Welder for a lot of energies. I couldn't really pull off any big attacks. And my Greens opponent was able to set up pretty well. They got Power Plant in place, Stamp locked me both games, even with my Jirachi. So I took a hard L. Only time in the tournament I double lost. So that was pretty rough, going off round 1, first game of the tournament. Just taking the loss obviously was hard, but I knew that I took a loss to that deck, so it was fine going in. Went into round 2, hit a Malamar. These games were the complete opposite. Starting in game 1, I went first, got the Welder. I hit Tina, cross-divided both of his Inkays for 100, and he just scooped his cards up there. He said, there's nothing I can do. You killed all my Inkays. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I have no setup. Going into game 2, I didn't get the Welder turn 1 and turn 2, so I wasn't able to do, the super oppressive cross divide play. But what ended up happening is I was setting on my board with Turbo Strike. So a Turbo Strike to the bench Mewtwo, trying to cross divide with that one. And then he made an error where he used Giratina's Shadow Impact and then put the 40 damage on an Inkay.
Mm-hmm.
And so that let me use Cross Divide, 90 Malamar, and then 20 onto the Inkay to take the 3 prizes on those 3. And from there, he had no more energy acceleration, and I had Jirachi down, so he was two-shotting my Mewtwo's, so he just lost the trade from there. So pretty confident win against that matchup. Going into round 3, I actually hit a Beheeyem. I was a little bit worried at first because he had Ninetales in his deck, and Ninetales can be rough. I can power up Giratina with Turbo Strike and attack with that, or I can, double blaze it, but it isn't the easiest thing in the world to get through. Fortunately, I just kind of ran him over with Cross Divide both games. He didn't really draw anything.
Yeah.
It was a super quick series, so that was kind of one of the things I was talking about, where you can almost beat anything just because of how Cross Divide's such a good attack. So he didn't set up great, and I was easily able to sweep those games. Round 4, back from lunch break, I hit another Greens Reshizard. Wasn't super psyched about this, but I knew it was an okay matchup if I draw well. Game 1, he went first and drew past, and then I donked him, so that went pretty well. In Game 2, I was in an extremely good position. I had a Mewtwo inactive. I was tag purging. Both of his power plants were in discard. I was down to 2 prize cards, and I knew that there was nothing that could stop me from going tag purge and then GX Macargo onto his bench Reshizard to take the majority of my prize cards because he had no plant left.
Mm-hmm.
And then he Pokegeared for a Lusamine, and Lusamine backed both his power plants, put one into play, and that left me with no way to win because I had Naganadel GX still in my remaining prize cards, so I couldn't just try to snipe the bench Reshizard. I had my stamp and discard and all of my catchers, so I had no way left to attack with my Mewtwo. So the Lusamine got me in that game, and I ended up conceding soon after that to try to save time for Game 3. Game 3, he started Reshizard, which is extremely big in the matchup. If they don't get the turn 3 Energy Excel with Volcanion, first of all, they have a Reshizard just sitting in their active that you can blow up. Mm-hmm. And second of all, they don't have Volcanions to stall for time or to hit through Tag Purge. So that made a big change. I won this game pretty quickly. I just knocked out his active Reshizard, and then when he benched the next one, he wasn't able to get Stamp in the same turn. So I just replaced his Stadium and catchered it and blew that one up as well. So pretty quick 1-2 knockout on the 2 GXs there to finish out the round. So I was feeling pretty good, coming from 0-1 up to 3-1. Only need to win 3 more to make day 2. Yeah. In round 5, I hit a Guardian, which I was pretty sad about because Guardian was one of the matchups I was most worried about. Game 1, he once again, like the Reshizard, dead drew. He had a Xerneas and a Gardevoir, but couldn't find any supporter cards. So I was able to go in with Reshizard and swung and killed all 5 of those. So that was pretty easy. One thing that I had to be cautious about, though, in Game 2 was that I once again went in with Reshizard, and I hit for 30 on the first Gardevoir, but then he was switching to his second one. And because I knew he played Xerneas in his deck, I couldn't go for the 230 I hit for 230 on the first Gardevoir.
Yeah.
And then he went switch into a second one. And I really wanted to be able to go, just hit for 230 on this and set up the cross divide play. But his hand was huge, and I knew he had Xerneas GX in his deck. So I knew if I did that, the 460 was just going to get swung back onto my Reshizard. I wasn't going to be able to hit through his charms, and I was going to be in a super weak position. So I just was forced to outrage for 30. This let him just go greens for Great Potion, heal off the active, and he was able to soften up my Reshizard. The next turn, he finished the knockout with Xerneas, and this was a really pivotal turn in the game because he put Plant in play, and then I brought up my Jirachi, and I needed to Jirachi into a Giant Hearth. If I did that, then I was going to be able to use Naganadel GX's attack to snipe off the bench Gardevoir 230 because he couldn't find a charm. Mm-hmm. And that would let me use Cross Divide or Double Blaze to knock out the last Gardevoir. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, I whiffed it, so I was forced to just pass. He then used Xerneas' GX attack, killed my Jirachi, and over the next few turns, he was able to knock out a Dedenne. So Game 2 went pretty unfortunate for me. Game 3 was kind of like Game 1. He drew greens and supporter cards, but he really just wasn't able to keep up. If you lead Reshizard in that matchup, which is what you should do pretty much every game, they have to draw a lot of resources because they have to be healing, they have to be switching between their attackers, but they also have to constantly be playing power plant. If you take a knockout, they have to stamp you. So going aggro Reshiram really makes them find a lot of cards, and he wasn't able to do that game, so I was able to take the win there. Going into the next round, 4-1 at this point, I hit a Blacephalon. I felt pretty good in this matchup. You can again end up for 170, Tina, the 10 on the Blound. We talked about this matchup a lot in the meta discussion last week.
Yeah.
You just kind of try to skip B-string at all expenses. So game 1, he dead drew, so I just kind of rolled him over. GX the first Blound with my Mewtwo. I saw that he only had one playable on board and didn't play any supporters, so just went full in, turn 1 double blazed him, and then he drew a draw supporter, didn't get any B-strings though, so I just again dealt the bench Blacephalon, and he was pretty much out of the game from there. Game 2 was the opposite. I wasn't able to draw anything, and he exploded. I had to take a turn. I was forced to give him B-strings. I used Flare Strike on him, and then from there he just hit a ton of B-strings, hit Welder, destroyed me, so I couldn't do anything about that game. And then game 3 was kind of the only close game in the series. I did again a play where I put 170 on the bench Blound, but then he was able to Mind Blow and knock out my Mewtwo. So this made it where I needed to hit a Welder, and I also needed to hit custom catchers because he had retreated into the bench Blound. So what he had done on his first few turns is instead of going in for Mind Blow knockouts on my small stuff like Dedenne or Jirachi, he had just kept building up energies on his bench Nagano with charging up, and then Weldering 2 separate Blounds. So whenever I hit for 170 on the bench, he had enough energies just to simply retreat into the bench one and then Mind Blown. That way I couldn't use Giratina's 10 to instantly kill it and then kill the active Blound. So luckily I was able to hit Welder to let me use my Flare Strike, and I was also able to hit catchers so that I could use Giratina to hit 10. I skipped B-string, and then he really had no business coming back in the game. He had already lost on so many energies that he whiffed to kill the next turn, and then I just again dealt his Dedenne for game.
Nice.
In the next round, I hit Rahul Reddy, ARG teammate, playing Mewbox as well. These games were super uneventful. Game 1, he drew past, and then I GX'd him. Game 2, I didn't draw past, but I didn't draw Welder for like the first 3 turns or so, and he was able to hit his Welder, so it really wasn't close at all. And Game 3 was extremely interesting. We both started off with a Welder, so we both had Mewtwo's with energy, but my active was my Giratina, and his active was his Mind Report Mewtwo. So we neither of us had ways to move our active, and to make matters worse, I had to Dedenne away 2 of my 3 switch on turn 1. Because I didn't have any basics in hand, so I had to leave the Tina active. So this left both of us in a really weird position where we were both trying to draw out of it, be the first one to hit the huge catcher switch play, but neither of us had anything in hand either. So there were 4 turns we were just draw pass, back and forth, until finally I top decked Dedenne, and then went for a risky double catcher on his Mewtwo. Dedenne hit my 3rd switch, GX'd him, took all his energy off his board, and then he had pretty much no way to come back after that. So the games really weren't that interesting. I just drew better than him. In my experience, that's kind of been what Mewtwo Mirror is. You know, if both players play well, then whoever draws better is going to win. So that's what happened in that game. The next round, in round 8, I hit a Blacephalon again. This was a Blacephalon, one of my friends, Rob Stevens, who actually was only playing 4 Welder and 4 Pokegear. So game 1, he didn't hit any of his supporters. You know, we only had 8. So he drew the Dedenne, but then off of that, he super fizzled. So I was able to easily Flare Strike into Double Blaze. He didn't even get any B-strings on his 1 turn. So I pretty easily took game 1. Game 2 was probably one of my worst dead draws of the entire tournament. I just started Jirachi GX and passed. I had like 2 or 3 turns to draw out of it, but it didn't matter. Eventually, he just Mind Blown for a knockout on the Jirachi, so wasn't really anything I can do about that one. Game 3, it was once again kind of the best game we played in the set. We both drew decently, but I was able to do the play where I used Naganadel GX, hit for 170 on the bench. He wasn't able to retreat and spawn and take the knockout, so we just had to take the knockout. And then I was able to combine reset stamp with a knockout, skipping B-string, and from there he really had no way to come back. So that was kind of the ideal game against Blounds. 7-1 heading into the final round to hit yet another Blacephalon. This one was a good friend of mine, Michael Bergerac, but it was much unlike any of the other Blounds lists in that he played a consistent, aggressive list. He had 4 Treasure, 4 Cherish Ball. I think he had 4 Ultra Space as well, and then 4 Acrobike, no custom catcher. So the goal of his deck was just, put gear, all that good stuff, hit the Welder, set up my Naganadels, Ultra Conversion, and then just blow up whatever's in your active. So This was actually, I thought it was going to be easier going into the round because without catchers, I could manipulate my board. But it was actually a lot harder because he was able to consistently put energy on his board much more than the other two could have. So I wasn't actually able to set up the B string skip, or both of my Mewtwo's would just been 1-2 killed, even without B string. So it was looking pretty scary in game one, but I was able to hit for 150 on his active with my Cargo GX, putting it in range of cross divide kill next turn. This forced him to discard 6 energy off his board, and he left 3 energy on his bench to Ganondorf GX. That way, if I did do the cross divide play, he still then again Ganondorf GX and would snipe my Dene for game. I reset stamped him to 2, and then used mine Ganondorf GX, or copied it with Mewtwo, to hit for 170 on his benched one. He drew past off the stamp, I GX'd then to Ganondorf and the active Blown with cross divide. That skipped B string and left him with no energy on board. He then whiffed the welder to win the game off of his top deck. So I was able to take that game one. Game one was pretty long, actually. It took like 25 minutes. So going into game two, I knew that if I lost this, we were probably going to tie. I couldn't really do much game two. I drew pretty mediocre. He didn't draw great as well, but if you don't draw great with Mewtwo in the Blooms matchup, they're pretty much going to run over you. So I wasn't able to set up any math. I couldn't skip B string, and then he was able to go pretty aggressive, killed my one Mewtwo. And then going into game three, we pretty much just ID'd after 5 minutes, and there was 5 minutes left. We both had a pretty strong board state. It didn't look like it was going to go anywhere, so we took the tie. I was content with the 7-1 after day one. My goal was just to make day two, especially after starting 0-1, to be able to go 7-1 the rest of the day.
Yeah.
That was amazing. And I was joking with my my roommates after day one. They were like, was the Tina better than the Wob? Because those were the two spots. And I was like, well, I actually played 0 decks with the Prism Star on day one. So I kind of had an odd day one, didn't hit any Reshiram or Pika, but I was hoping to change that going into day two. Day two, round one, hit a friend of mine, Jason A. I don't know how to pronounce his last name. Don't want to butcher it. So he was playing Pikarom. Game one, he actually prized both of his Pikaroms. So he really didn't have any. Yeah, he didn't have any attackers. He had double Hoobo, so he went in with those, and then he tried to power up his Raichu, but he had no energy acceleration whatsoever. So I pretty much ran him over game one. Game two was a little bit more of a typical game, but I also drew pretty well. He had a Jirachi inactive, Stellar Wished, had a Pika ready for turn two. I turn one tag purge the Jirachi, which in the Pika matchup is the best start you could have whatsoever, because they still have to full blitz to set up their board.
Right.
But your guy doesn't take any damage. You just have a fresh Mewtwo, and they have a Pika in the active you can just kill whenever you want. So you had to obviously full blitz on Mewtwo. I GX it with Zard from there, and then I had 2 fully powered up Mewtwo's that were going to snipe his Dedenne. I don't think he played Mew, so we had no way to prevent then again and I'll snipe. And he tried to do paralyzed plays with Raichu, but I was able to hit the switch one of the turns, and there wasn't much you could do about that. I drew really well in the second game. At this point, I'm 8-1-1, so I need to go 2-1-1 to make it into top 8 or bubble. This round I hit Michael Catron, who's one of my main testing partners. He was playing Malamar. I won the flip, so I was feeling super confident. I got the turn 1 Welder, turn 1 Fire Attach, passed to him. He got down 2 Inkays, a Jirachi, and then a Tina with an energy. He unfortunately actually prized his Giratina Prism Star, which was one card that was super important for him in the matchup, because if he can get that down and get 3 energy on it turn 1, then it at least puts some sort of pressure on my Mewtwo if I'm able to get the cross divide play off. Unfortunately, he prized it, so whenever I did hit the second Welder Psychic cross divide, knock out 2 Inkays and your Jirachi, he had no response left, only had a Giratina, and he scooped soon after that.
Yeah.
Game 2 was completely different. I didn't draw Welder for the first 2 turns. He set up pretty well, and he pretty much just rolled me. I didn't really have any shot at winning the game. Once again, that was how the first 2 games went, and then game 3 was the one close one in the series. I had a play where I welded my 2 energy on my Mewtwo, did Denate, Acrobiked, and then whiffed a Psychic to cross divide him on turn 2. So I was forced to just Turbo Strike, knock out his active. He brought up another Jirachi, was able to Stellar Wish into a Cynthia, got some stuff, and then attacked with Giratina. I did hit the Psychic that turn, and I cross-divided his Giratina and his Jirachi, so I went down to 3 price cards. He had damage on my active Mewtwo. The next turn, he attacked me. I think he attacked me. No. Yeah, the next turn, he was forced to just pass with a Jirachi inactive he went into a Mew. So we went into Mew, and then Psy-powered 3 damage on my SB Axis while he found 2 more Inkays. So At this point, I was feeling pretty much in control because I had a very large prize lead. I was up 3-6. But the thing that was really bad for me was that the turn where I had to dig for the psychic, I knew that if I whiffed it, he would go way ahead in the prize trade because that Mewtwo was going to most likely die. So I had used Dedenne. I only had one bench spot left. And with that Dedenne, I had to discard my Jirachi GX, which meant that the entire game he was going to be able to hit me for weakness with Giratina.
Yeah.
So on that turn, I simply used Flare Strike to knock out it. Or no. I just used Turbo Strike to knock out the Mew. I put some energy on my bench Latios. From there, he was able to go with his Giratina, and he finished off my Mewtwo. At this point, he had an Esper on bench with an energy, and I was actually checkmated. I thought a while about this, but there was nothing I could do. I had no Mewtwo on board with energy because I started Deoxys. Had to bench the Latios at one point because I needed something to switch into, so I'd have the Jirachi option off of Dedenne to try to hit the turn 2 Welder. Mm-hmm. And then I had 2 Dedennes down as well, so that left me with no room to bench a second Mewtwo to Turbo Strike on, which meant that I couldn't use Niganadel GX to knock out his Esper, and there were 9 damage counters on my Espeoxys. So the next turn he simply promoted the Esper, knocked out my Espeoxys, and then won the game. So that was kind of an unfortunate series. It was one of the closer ones that I lost. Didn't hit a second energy early, and then having to Dedenne the Jirachi really killed me, but that happens. So yeah. I was glad that if I lost to anyone like that way, it was going to be him. So glad he was able to do as well as he did, make top 8. In the next round, I hit another one of my very good friends and testing partners, Rowan Stavenow. He was playing Pikarom. Game 1, he prized, what was it? He prized a Pikarom and a Raichu, and then didn't take it off his first 2 prizes. So he was left with almost no attackers to win the game. But unfortunately for me, I didn't draw Walder for the first few turns, and then his first reset stamp he played completely stuck me with a dead hand. So he went reset stamp, Ting Me Return with the Dedenne, and then hit a bunch of powers, went Ting Me Return, and the next turn just knocked me out with Hoopa. So I was left with no Mewtwo on board, and I didn't get anything off my stamp cards, and Jirachi, he took the Raichu off prizes and then was able to mount a big comeback from there. So I was down after losing that game. You know, I didn't have any more losses to take, or I wouldn't be able to make top 8, and especially I was so close to winning that game, but just didn't get anything off stamp. So I was worried that I was, going to lose one of the next 2. In game 2, this was probably the craziest that I drew at any point during the event. I was drawing extremely bad. I had to Welder onto a Reshiram on turn 2, and I hit for 230 on his active Pika. He then benched a Pika and just used Flare. He just used Full Bliss, putting 150 on me. And I knew that if I didn't get a huge combo this turn, then he would probably be able to just tag bolt next turn, put himself down to 1 prize card, and then win the game with catchers on the Jirachi because he had all 4 left. So I was feeling pretty nervous. Going into my turn, I had like an 8-card hand. I top decked a custom catcher, so I was able to double custom catcher up his bench Reshizard, used Dedenne, drew 6. I squished into Jirachi into Welder, Weldered the 2 energy into my Reshizard, and then off of the Giratina to knock out his bench Pikarom, take 3 prizes. I got the escape board, retreated, and double blazed his bench Pikarom.
Yeah.
So I took all 6 prize cards in 1 turn.
That's pretty nice.
To come back in that game.
Yeah.
It was insane. That was the first time that I had gotten to use Giratina throughout the tournament. So I was hyped that it did something, and that was the play we've been trying to do in testing. Take the whole 6 prize cards in 1 turn to get around stamps. So I was really hyped that I was able to do it in 1 game.
Definitely makes you feel like Giratina was worth the spot.
Yeah, for sure. And then in game 3, it was a pretty much a normal game. I started off with Turbo Strike, Tag Purge, killed the Jirachi. He had to attack into me. I then used Charizard GX attack, and I went down to 2 prize cards. This was the point where the game kind of got to be a little bit scary. So he had full bliss on his Raichu, and he still had his Koga Prism left. So what he was going to be able to do is he was going to if he was able to hit a reset stamp, then he could paralyze me with Raichu, and the next turn he could potentially go catcher up at Dedenne, full blitz on the Dedenne, accelerate energy to his Pikarom, and then tag bolt with the Dedenne and my Pikarom, leaving me with no options. So he hit the paralyze. I whiffed a switch to take the game, and then he stamped me to 1. Unfortunately for him, off the Dedenne, he whiffed the catchers to knock out the bench, or to stall for 1 more turn with the Dedenne because he needed to accelerate more energy to his Pikarom. So he just had to knock me out, and then I drew an energy out off of the stamp for game. So that was a little bit unfortunate on his part, but it happens. So I was glad to take that win, get to a win and in. On my winning in, I hit Pidgeotto, Oranguru control, Ian Robb. I was pretty scared of this matchup because he and Grant were telling me and the other Mewtwo's all day how free of a matchup we were. So I knew that they had to have something figured out that either DDG didn't at Worlds or that Jimmy must have just gotten pretty unlucky on stream. I know Jimmy did play 50 HP Pidgey, which did have at least something to do with it. Yeah. So game 1 against Ian was extremely close. I had a big Mewtwo active, but he was able to hit a crushing hammer that stopped me from wiping his board with Cross Divide on turn 2. He also only benched 2 Pidgey at a time, so I knew if I used Cross Divide, I would weaken myself a lot because I wouldn't have a GX attack. He wouldn't be able to go Articuno, Plant, Stamp. I would go down to just 2 prize cards, and I was probably going to dead draw from there. So I was holding my GX attack for a while. He then eventually used Articuno, but I had powered up my Latios on the bench, so even though there's a Power Plant in play, I could still use the Latios to attack for 120.
Yeah.
Because the plant in play turned off the Latios stability, so I didn't need to have 5 Pokemon in play to attack.
Yep.
So I was using that, and the game comes to a point where I have 1 prize card left. He catches up my Dedenne, stamps me to 1, and then misses Chip Chip Ice Axe. So if I get an energy off one of the 2 cards, then I can simply retreat into my Latios and then tag Purge for game. I didn't. I hit 2 Pokemon, and then he hit the Mars stuff and just comboed me out of the game from there. I conceded soon after. Honestly, I had no business hitting game 1. I think he flipped something like 7 straight tails on Crushing Hammer to get rid of my Psychic Energy. So he got extremely unlucky to even give me a chance to win.
Oh, wow, yeah.
But going into game 2, I went first, and he drew extremely bad this game. He didn't get any Pidgeys down on turn 1, so his Elm for turn 2 for Pidgeys was late. I cross-divided then, and he whiffed an energy for, I think, 2 turns to resource management anything back in. So at this point, he was extremely low on resources. He missed a reset stamp on a crucial turn when he used Articuno, so I just used Macargo GX to take it out for my last 2 prizes. Mm-hmm. And going into game 3, we had something like 10 minutes left. I knew that only I was going to be able to win the game, so I felt pretty confident about at least having another win in the next round. He went first. He, got the normal setup. I also got the normal setup, but it came to a point where in the game, my hand was pretty dead. I had a Jirachi on bench, but that was it. And then he obviously had a setup. He had 3 Pidgeotto. I didn't have anywhere near a Cross Divide, and I knew that if he put a plant in play and then marged away my 1 Stadium I had in hand, I had a 3-card hand, that there was actually a good chance that I could actually lose this game by him just attacking with the Articuno. Mm-hmm. So I offered the ID, something like 7 minutes left. I knew I wasn't going to be able to win because of how I was drawing. He accepted it, so went into the final round pretty content with having a win in. I hit another peak ROM in my final round, one of my roommates, Harrison Orr. So sad to hit a roommate on the win in, but obviously I was happy that it was a peak ROM, which was a much better matchup than all the stuff surrounding me. So game 1, it was pretty atypical. I hit Welder on my bench Mewtwo's, but I couldn't find a switch card, so my Jirachi was stuck active. He full blitzed it, GX'd my next Mewtwo with Raichu, and then just hit catchers on Dedenne for game. I couldn't keep up with his pace with that pace. I had 1 turn where I could hit catchers, then knock out the Raichu, but I didn't. So he took the game in pretty quick 3 consecutive turns. Game 2 was pretty much the opposite. I was able to go first. I got a big Mewtwo up, tag purged his Jirachi, GX'd his Charizard, and then he prized his Mew, I believe, so he couldn't stop me from using the Ganondorf on Dedenne at some point. So he just scooped that one up. Going into game 3, this is another one where I drew pretty well. Once again, he lets a Jirachi in his active, and I tag purged it on turn 1. He just used full blitz, and then used Charizard GX attack to put myself down to 2 prize cards. He stamped me and paralyzed me with Raichu, but I was able to draw the switch over the next 2 turns to switch into my Jirachi with a board, retreat, and then just use the knockout with my Macargo GX to finish off the game. So that was definitely super relieving, especially because of how close that game was to know that I most likely guaranteed my spot in top 8. So obviously I was able to make it in. I made it in his 5th seed, hit another Pikarom in top 8, but it was Danny Altavilla who was playing 2 Power Plant in Pikarom. So I was scared of the matchup. I knew that if he can get Plant Stamp, which I didn't know at the time they only played 1 Stamp, that makes the matchup a lot better for me. It's harder for them to hit Stamp. They can only do it once. Mm. So Judge to 4 honestly is not that bad when I have Jirachi that can see 5 more cards hit a Stadium. So knowing that, I don't think the matchup is that bad. But going in, I was pretty scared of Plant, especially on, if he hits a turn 1, then I might not get anything in combination with the Judge. So I was definitely worried, but it ended up fine. So Game 1, he went Raichu tag team, attach Cynthia pass, and then I GX'd him and donked him.
Oh, nice.
Game 2, Game 2 was a really weird game where I was not drawing anything for like the first 4 turns. So he goes first, gets a Pikarom up, passes to me. I start Latios, do some stuff, attach to Mewtwo, use Giratina, retreat into it, and pass. He knocks out Giratina, puts energy on Zorora. This was a pretty big opportunity for me. I had the Dedenne in my hand. If I drew a Welder off the Dedenne, then I would be able to use Charizard's GX for 300 on his active, and he only would have a Zorora set up. This meant that he really had no way to respond to my Mewtwo, and it was going to take at least 5 prize cards. So I was pretty confident. But off the Dedenne and the Jirachi, I actually whiffed it out to Welder. So I was forced to just attach past my Mewtwo again while leaving Giratina active. At this point, he once again used Full Bliss to knock it out, put the energy on Raichu this time, which was a lot more threatening. He knocked out, yeah. From there, I went to a Jirachi. I whiffed a Stellar Wish into anything useful. I had to leave Jirachi inactive at this point because he had his labs in place. So I had stadiums, attached to my benched Mewtwo for the 3rd time, and passed. At this point, he decided not to kill my Jirachi with his Pikarom. He decided to retreat into his Jirachi and try to wish into a plant. Because he knew if he had a plant, then because I didn't have any stadiums in my hand, I would be in an extreme disadvantage because I couldn't top deck with Welder and plant in the same turn.
Right.
Luckily for me, he didn't hit the power plant off the Jirachi and was forced to just pass again because his only supporter in hand was Judge, and he didn't want to give me a good hand. From there, I was able to top deck a Welder. I welded on my Mewtwo, hit the stadium, retreated, and then the Pikarom actually had damage on it. I missed something. The Pikarom had 120 damage on it from earlier in the game, and I was able to cross divide 120 there, 70 on the Jirachi, took 4 prize cards, and then on his next turn, he used Zorora to punch in my Mewtwo with a plant in play, and I was able to draw a stadium off of Judge. So I used Macargo's GX's attack to take my last 2 prizes there. So game 2 was a lot closer. It was pretty scary because I was drawing bad, but luckily he obviously didn't hit the plant, wasn't able to capitalize. So I was able to take that one. He did draw pretty bad in the series, I will admit. He definitely could have drawn better. He had to deny away a bunch of catchers in game 2, which hurt him because he wasn't able to pressure my Mewtwo. But I think the matchup is good overall, so definitely one that I'd like to hit more if I played Mewtwo in tournaments.
Sure. And
then finally, I hit Azul in top 4 playing Mewtwo Mirror. And kind of like the games with Rahul, these were very, very draw-based. Game 1, he hit Welder onto his Mewtwo. I hit Welder onto my Mewtwo. He hit catchers onto mine, knocked it out. I didn't hit Welder. He rolls me from there. Game 2, my start was pretty bad. I was really scared I was going to dead draw. I just attached a Psychic to Giratina, Weldered, the 1 fire, drew 3 and passed. He attacked with Latios, tag purged, hit my active Dedenne. From there, I retreated into my Giratina and actually hit for 130 on his Latios. This put him in a really bad situation because he didn't really have anything that could respond to the Giratina. He could have Macargo GX'd with his Mewtwo, but that would open him to me responding with Mewtwo, and then I would take a huge prize lead. So from there, he decided to use catchers on my Mewtwo I had benched, hit it for 120 with his Latios, because he had Jirachi GX on the bench. I then simply retreated into my Giratina, Weldered onto a different Mewtwo, and then took the knockout with it. From here, he brings up his new Mewtwo and then whiffs his Psychic Energy to attack my Giratina. So my Giratina actually got 2 attacks off without ever taking any damage, which was pretty funny, and it went through his Latios at the same time. So Mewtwo was a pretty big MVP of the Game 2 match. But after he whiffed a Psychic Energy, I went in with Charizard, Flare Blitz for 300, went down to 1 prize, had 2 Mewtwo set up, and I could easily negate it all at the Dedenne, so he just conceded.
Yeah.
Game 3, I started Jirachi and actually got 3 mulligans. So I was feeling pretty good, had a ton of energy in hand. But unfortunately, I only got a treasure. I didn't get any Cherish Ball or a Welder off of the 3 mulligans top deck or Jirachi. So I just had to bench the Mewtwo and attach and pass. He Turbo Striked my Jirachi, put energy on his bench, and I top decked another dead card, benched an Espeon, Turbo Strike to it, and then he just won in the next 2 turns by killing my 2 Pokemon. I couldn't find a Jirachi, so he just used Flamethrower on the Mewtwo and then had the GX set up for the Espeon Deoxys. So unfortunate way to end the tournament, obviously, with the dead draw, but happy to get there. And a bunch of my opponents dead drew throughout the day that I probably wouldn't have been able to beat if they hadn't done that. So definitely a good finish.
Oh yeah, for sure. Top 4 to regionals is nothing to scoff at all. Of course, $1,500, a bunch of championship points as well. So definitely should put you in a good spot moving forward through the rest of the season. So looking at Azul's list that obviously ended up winning the tournament, and then you and Tristan, who got top 4. Azul obviously didn't play any Jirachis or the escape boards, like none of that engine, and opted for the PAL pads with the 4th Dedenne. Looking at his list now after the tournament, and obviously looking at you and Tristan, you guys both obviously ended up well with this version. Which would you say that you prefer? You might be a little biased, I would assume, but has your opinion changed, or do you still think the Jirachi engine is better for the deck?
So I think that there are benefits to both versions. I think that overall I like the Jirachi version better. I think that the thing with the Jirachi version is it's the optimal way to play the deck. It's the best engine. It draws you the best cards. It can get you Hearth really good against the Greens decks. It can get you Stadiums. But the Jirachi is also a big liability in some times. Against Pikarom, if you leave Jirachi inactive on turn 1, they can kill it. Then they only need to kill Dedenne and Mewtwo, which is pretty easy for them to do. Against Mewtwo Mirror especially, it's really bad if you have a Jirachi on board. That's a 120 HP thing. They can just catch her and Turbo Strike for knockout. So I think that it is a big liability if you bench it in those matchups. But what I found out throughout the tournament, especially with Mewtwo Mirror, that it was often a draw hot matchup anyways. So it never really came down to me having a Jirachi on board where he could just catch her or Nagandel it for game. It was always just one player completely blowing the other one out of the water. So I do think that the Jirachis makes the Mewtwo Mirror slightly unfavorable, but I personally would continue them playing forward just because of how much better it makes your greens matchups and how it makes the consistency of your deck go up a ton. It gives you 3 really good starters. Even if you start Latios, you can retreat into the Jirachi. It also gives you an excuse to play a skateboard, which are really good in the Pikarom matchup and in general. Just having 2 more outs to retreat your Dedenne or even your Jirachi GX on turn 1 if you start it is really good. And you playing 3 Switch. I think that 3 Switch should be played in both versions of the deck. Switch is just such a versatile card, especially against Pikarom. It's very good. And it lets you get more attacks off, lets you move between your attackers. So I think that I like the Jirachi version going forward because of those reasons. But I can't fault anyone for playing the other version. There are pros and cons to both, as I kind of explained.
Yeah, for sure. So looking back at the tournament, obviously things worked out great for you, but is there anything you think you would change about the list if you wanted to play it at League Cups moving forward or at Knoxville in a couple weeks?
So one thing that I definitely try to find room for is a Recent Hole Marshadow. I missed it at a lot of times, and not only versus the Greens decks, it was actually pretty relevant in Mirror. There would be many times where I would want to stamp my opponent to a low amount of cards, but I knew it wouldn't do anything because there was a Stadium in play, so they always had the energy that they would need to get. But with Reset Hole Marshadow, you can stamp them down to 1 or 2 cards and then Reset Hole away your Stadium, which means that they don't get guaranteed energy.
Yeah.
So that's one thing that's big against both Mewtwo and against ability Restart as well. So I think I definitely find room for that card. I was thinking about it today. Maybe you can cut either Acrobike or a Fire Energy are probably the cuts that I would find for that. Also, maybe another tech for a Guardian. We were thinking about Lysander Labs, as I kind of mentioned before the event, just to give you a way to, nuke another Guardian throughout the game. So I think that you could cut either one of the 2 previous cuts or a Viridian for the Labs. But other than that, I think the list was pretty optimal. I didn't find a problem with it. All my techs did stuff throughout the event, and there wasn't really anything that I missed. So you'd obviously like to have, 4th Mike, 4th Dedenne, 4th Mysterious Treasure, but I don't think those things are needed over the consistency that Jirachi and extra Switch cards gives you.
For sure. All right, man. Well, congratulations once again. Like I've said, super sick accomplishment and a great way to start off your Masters career. As we close things out here, I'm going to give you a chance if there's any shout-outs you want to give or any social media plugs, anything like that you want to do. Feel free. The floor is yours.
All right. First of all, shout out to the lab, the testing group, Kenny Britton, Keanu Amini, Will Jenkins, Jonathan Croxton, Justin Macari. They were the ones who, prepared with me for the event, tested with me for the event. They were the ones who originally sent me the Mewtwo list. They told us that they would play it if they were going to the event. So huge shout out to those guys. As well, shout out to Michael Catron, Eric Rodriguez, and Justin Macari for letting me borrow cards for the event. Somehow I actually left my Pikarom deck at home, which had all my custom catchers and my Dedennes in it. And I didn't find this out until very late on Friday. So I woke up Saturday morning and was frantically messaging people saying, hey, I don't have Dedenne or catcher. Can you hit me up? Oh, Rowan Stabenow, he was the one that gave me the catchers. So thank you to all of you guys for helping me be able to find the cards. I wouldn't have been able to play the deck, obviously. So thank you guys a ton for that. And then finally, shout out to ARG, my sponsor, for all that you do. I love representing you at events. And then check out Team Rocket's Hideout for the articles that I write there. There's a Mewtwo one coming out for me, both on the list that I thought that I was going to play before the event, and then the one that I played, a small tournament recap, kind of like this, and then what I would do moving forward. So look out for that.
For sure. All right, congrats again, Isaiah. Guys, definitely be sure to check those things out. The article coming out soon. And if you enjoyed this video, please be sure to leave a like down below. That way, we can keep making more videos like this, and subscribe if you want to see more. And Isaiah and I are going to get out of here. Thank you guys so much for watching. Until next time, take care.